The spiritual meaning of Cana's marriage feast. John 2, 1-12. 1. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. 2. And both Jesus was called, and his disciples, to the marriage. 3. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, They have no wine. 4. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. 5. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. 6. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. 7. Jesus saith unto them, Fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. 8. And he saith unto them, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. 9. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom. 10. And saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. 11. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. 12. After this he went down to Capernaum, he, and his mother, and his brethren, and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. Jesus came to this world to make a new and eternal covenant with people. Jesus and covenant are a marriage agreement. So Jesus himself is the groom and the husband, and the saints are the bride and the wife, so you can think that Jesus' first miracle was appropriate for the wedding feast. It is established on certain conditions that marriage, like all other covenants, agrees with each other. The condition of marriage is mutual love and mutual service. We want to learn about our mind change process through this marriage feast in Cana. 1. The text states that this wedding feast was the third day. This record is mentioned for a more important lesson than to let us know that it follows sometime after the closing of the previous chapter. The number 3 is the number that represents perfection, and the third day is the state of mind in the middle of fullness. Jesus means that we are just changing into a good heart in our hearts. The Galilee and Cana, where the wedding feast was held, symbolizes the formation of a new spiritual mind instead of the old classical ideas symbolizing the Jewish church and the general Christianity that will now disappear. If we look only at marriage itself, Apostle John tells us, Jesus' mother was there. As the mother of Jesus at this wedding, Maria was in Cana, a dual character, the expressed mind, which speaks of the spiritual origins of a complete heart. This source has been preserved by God's providence, and it tells us that when this Cana wedding feast ends, a new mind can be formed, symbolized by another wedding feast. When a person is married, it refers to the heart that is made into the most complete and beautiful form of the marriage. 2. The Jesus' disciples participating in this wedding feast mean those who love good and decide to believe in truth and follow. Being a disciple of Jesus constitutes the heaven and church of God that exists in the mind of one person or in the collective mind. Because the love of truth is the life-giving source of the church, and when it is felt in our minds, we realize the truth itself. We must have an active desire to receive Jesus in order to be asked for a spiritual wedding, expressing that there was an active desire to know God's heaven. And this is also the knowledge of sacred spiritual truth and the gratitude for knowing this spiritual world. The person who is sincerely invited into Jesus' love does not always seek vain. In the text, this love of Jesus is going to increase and advance to a higher level than the truth we own. However, at this wedding, we are worried because we lack the wine that is the truth. 3. They have no wine. Symbolizes the exhaustion of spiritual truth in our hearts. It was Mary, the mother of Jesus, who informed Jesus that the wine had fallen, not anyone else. But when the wine was out during the feast, Jesus' mother informed him that wine had fallen. Mary, who expressed the source of life in our hearts, sensed that our hearts lacked spiritual truth and knew that Jesus was the only one who could supply love. I mean, to appeal to Jesus, who is present as truth, to the shortcomings, and we must be fully aware of the knowledge of what we are doing in the course of what we are doing. If you lack knowledge, it's hard to get things right. It's being modelized in section 4. For Jesus called her woman. When she said woman, it was a title of respect, even if not absolute level. The reason Jesus called her a woman is that it implies a fundamental symbol in our minds expressed in Mary. As Jesus called Mary a woman, the words that followed were, "What does it have to do with me and you?" Answer. As Jesus answered, the wine drop at the wedding has nothing to do with Jesus. Because Jesus says that it does not matter because he does not have a natural good in our hearts. All of the miracles that have been performed at this wedding feast are just specimens of good things to come. In Bible words, Jesus' sacred love is nothing more than a shadow of design for us to enter into a heavenly marriage. In this wedding, miracles are the beginning of the first state of rebirth, in addition to being the beginning of the miracle Jesus will give. Jesus is telling the woman that the time has not yet come, and Jesus' time is a more important time. When it was within Jesus, beyond the details of Jesus' symbiotic life, it was the time of his resurrection, which was always in the state of Jesus looking ahead. In this state, Jesus' power is the time to accomplish everything we were trying to do for us. 5. Then Jesus' mother asks her servants to do whatever he says. She speaks of our hearts, each of us symbolizing the church. Mother's love for her child is the opposite of her love for her husband. Everyone loves to see the image of God in them. At the wedding feast, servants symbolize the little truths that obey the good, if you think of them, and all those who practice the will of Jesus. The teacher of the servants of wedding, of course, in the case of the text, the servants have practiced the will of the person who presides over the feast and practiced it according to Jesus' will. These truths serve the purpose of holy love, and this truth is the lowest truth in the word of Jesus. In other words, it means the lowest general truths of the Lord, the Bible itself, among spiritual life and light. 6. The wedding ceremony was followed by 6 stone jars of 2 or 3 stone along with the Jewish ceremony. These stone jars represent common sense lessons and regulations. In the very broad sense, jars represent the Bible in the form of letters. The water contained by these jars symbolizes the truths God has given us through the law, in the law for the cleanliness and rebirth of the Jews. There were 6 of water jars. The number 6 means the state of mind prepared with trials and tests. Some of the laws in the Bible are related to cleansing the mind with will, and some laws focus on making the mind cleaner with understanding. All sacred laws include both types, but in some cases the line is the first, and in other cases the line is the second. These 2 types are separate but never separated. 7. Jesus told them to fill the jar with water, so it filled the court, which left the mind that should be acknowledged in the 8 fixed ideas and general lessons that people knew and deprived them of the power in it. But Jesus has refilled our to a fixed idea fullness through Jesus' teachings and good life. Jesus has restored recognition and fulfilled the truth in the sense of the Bible's letters. Water symbolizes the general level of truth. This truth constitutes the true meaning of the Bible's words, and Jesus has fulfilled his recognition in his teachings and practiced love through his life. It is the duty of all people to grasp the true meaning of the Bible, to do what the Word really demands, to fill and fill God's love with teaching. 8. Now I have to give it to the banquet hall and I have brought it here. When natural levels of affection are excited by joy, they are likely to enter some state of disorder and oblivion, like the guests of a wedding feast. It is necessary to have rational judgment ability to require that such oblivion be regulated and controlled. But this is not natural reason, but true reason, acting under the influence of religious principles. And at the wedding, the banquet hall must drink before giving wine to its guests. Taste with wine symbolizes the judgment of reason. The servants who obeyed Jesus' orders poured water. This is a small truth to combine with sacred lines, but it's to think rationally. This water has turned into wine. The servants had been transformed into wine in their bowls by the way the servants were pumping water from the jars, where the servants' act of floating water turned into wine. In other words, all faiths have to have good life practice, which means that water has turned into wine. The appearance of all these miracles is that the divine teaching gives us enlightenment. The gift of heaven, which is so precious to me, must be practiced before we enter heaven, and the rebirth is growing into our spiritual creation. The highest love is the lowest obedience, which is introduced, arranged and complete in all the principles in the middle. At Jesus' command, the servants did what they did to spread the means of salvation from the Holy Word, and this principle of lively action comes from the deepest part of the soul from the Lord. True obedience is a means to supply us with heavenly truth and life's actions. 9. The banquet hall called the groom and said, the servants who had been drinking knew where the drink came from, but the banquet hall tasted it and called the groom. It is in the state of distinction between knowing the truth and knowing where it came from. The former is to know the truth, but the latter is to need a case study. The former is to learn the truth, but the latter is to understand the light of the truth as a means. The water turned into wine because it represents the truths that acted directly from the sacred good life, although it is a weak truth. But the banquet hall says it did not know where good wine came from. But the conversation itself shows that the banquet hall is not prepared by the groom. This is the state before our reason is developed by Jesus, and reason in this state is merely a common sense, without having its origin in the divinity. Or at least the truth is at a level lower than reason, at a level of common sense that is infinite and lower than eternal. This relationship is perceived in the process of rebirth as sacred truth. Perceived, the origin of this truth is a repetitive synergistic effect. First, the servants get used to the fact that Jesus made this sacred line of wine when he finally reaches the bridegroom. Even if the record of this incident is not directly related, the banquet hall and groom of the wedding party do not know that Jesus performed a great miracle at this wedding, but it is certain that he was led to the line of truth. This is a miracle that turns into good wine. 10. At the wedding party, the banquet hall calls the groom and speaks. Everyone has a good wine, a good wine, a good wine, and a bad one after the guests have drunk, and this good wine is still there. In this statement, the groom is a new pure line. The pure heart begins with the truth that comes from the line of good wine, and it is tilted to the truth without the line of bad wine. At least this includes everyone who has lived in the world so far. When people are drunk, or when they are drunk enough to be unable to hold their bodies, wine becomes an evil habit state of mind. Intellectual addiction and spiritual addiction begin with finding pleasure from truth without good life and faith that does not live good life. The fact that truth is given priority over good life is that spiritual addiction increases only knowledge according to the excess, which is recorded as drunkenness in the Bible. The banquet hall of the wedding feast is amazed that the groom has kept good drinks until the end. This is the common sense that we know before, and it goes through this downhill phase. And when the person falls, it is corrupted by the lack of spiritual knowledge of the person. When the mind that is immersed only in the truth is tilted to evil and his thoughts fall into error, the truth must escape from evil. New and higher prescriptions can be saved only from truth and new lines. In other words, it is in the mind that has already existed, and it has a good mind that can be rooted in higher development with new truths, which is written in the Bible as a good wine. The left behind good wine means our good heart itself. 11. Jesus performed this first target in Galilee Cana, and his honor was expressed by his disciples, who believed him. This miracle is the first state of mind in the process of being born again, and in the spiritual sense of the Bible, the first thing in the series always provides the key to the character of the entire series. So what the first means is not only the first in the order of time, but also the first in the order of sequence, and among all the similarities in heaven, marriage is the highest. This marriage is the source and the end of everything. God's will is a sacred marriage of law and wisdom. It has its continuity through the result and form of sacred marriage in the object created. The sacred marriage of infinite love and wisdom is applied to all other holy things, and in the heart of man, the unity of love and wisdom is called spiritual marriage. This marriage forms the kingdom of God in our hearts, and this miracle itself has the same context as expressing the general truth that has been transformed into spiritual truth. This is what has changed from a common faith to a spiritual faith. This miracle is being carried out in a reborn mind. Our knowledge and faith still begin with letters. At first we know the Lord as Nazareth. Nazareth means the Bible itself. At first we knew Jesus as Joseph's son. So our first faith in Jesus is as low and weak as our first concept of Jesus. But when we accompany Jesus at this wedding feast, and when we witness the water turn into wine, we see the glory of Jesus in this miracle of sacred power. Our faith in Jesus begins to be a spiritual level and becomes a starting point for entering heaven. 12. After this, Jesus went down to Capernaum with his mother, brothers and disciples. In the Bible, down refers to a lower state in a higher state. The principle of faith in our hearts is to make a holy life, which means that we come down from the mountain of the city where we have the 10 Commandments and go down to the truth to practice the law. Capernaum is a coastal area located on the border between Zebulun and Naphtali, Matthew 4:13. So Capernaum represents where goodness and truth actually combine. It's a common sense, which means the state of life. If it's a city, it's a common sense doctrine. From the location of the city, it means common sense about common life. The record that Jesus went down to Capernaum with his mother, brother and disciples has spiritual teachings for us. Jesus is leading our fundamental minds expressed as mothers. And he teaches that the thoughts of the heart in mercy and faith expressed as brothers and disciples lead to common sense about doctrine and life about the Lord. But why should we be led to the doctrine of truth and good? Because we already know common sense in the marriage of truth and good. The true marriage is completed by the increase of love and knowledge of each other in the process of marriage of this world. And while producing love and knowledge of truth and good life, the fusion of each other's character grows and gradually produces good thoughts and lives. True marriage is growing with rebirth. This is a lifelong homework. If rebirth is not completed, complete marriage is not completed. The marriage of the bachelor and the virgin must also hold hands in the hands of the combination of truth and good heart. In Capernaum, Jesus, his mother and his disciples said, "I have not stayed there many days." The length of time means the state of good life. The days of this world are the states of spiritual life. In spiritual sense, numbers are qualitative rather than quantities. In the Bible, many is related to the truth and small is recorded in relation to goodness. The fact that Jesus and the people around him did not stay in Capernaum for a long time is that the good ideas that entered the state of marriage entered into a state of goodness rather than a state of truth in doctrine. Conclusion. Our mind is a life that lives in a fundamental mind and lives in a good way with the principle and a life of reality from the viewpoint of God. This is the only true life that has ever been married to one's heart, and that is the one thing that love and faith are all about, and that is the one that we must hope to enter heaven. Without this, you become the guest of a wedding without a robe and you will be forced out to a dark place outside. So true marriage is a combination of good heart and truth, or a combination of love and faith, which makes us children of marriage. Spiritual marriage is the most important event, and so is the marriage of bachelor and virgin. When marriage really is one, this marriage is the happiest event in our lives at a normal level. And so it gives the warmest love and joy to others, and heavenly marriage is to be united in good heart and truth in this world and to enjoy a happy life. I pray that in God's will, happy lives will be abundantly fulfilled. Amen. Next, I will post a sermon on the spiritual meaning of John 2:13-25, cleaning the temple. If you have helped with your faith, click on your subscription. Thank you.